This is a very important specificity of European and international cooperation when we speak about European capitals of culture, because there is no European capital of culture without European cooperation or even international cooperation. Otherwise, it would be national or local capital of culture. But we are European capital of culture, so it's per se already a project targeted to European and international cooperation. It's at the core of all these activities. And then in addition, in European capitals of culture, we are having, you remember very well when you did the bidding process, we are having this European dimension chapter, but in a way, European dimension, and in that sense, already European exchange and cooperation is a transversal topic, of course. It's something which concerns literally everything in a European capital of culture. And it's also very well reflected, for example, that we are having tomorrow this focus on communication, which is part of the management parts of a European capital of culture, marketing. And we already understand also from there that it is international. It's per se not only limited to project cooperation. And I highlighted that with another slide. You see here again the different focal points of a European capital of culture. And on all these levels, we are having European and international cooperation and can benefit from the related added value. So when we think, for example, about the cultural strategies, we are having, for example, this cooperation of universities in ECoC cities. Yeah, so there is a lot of exchange also related to evaluation practices and methods and tools. So all this is international and European cooperation. Of course, it's an artistic program. This is the core in that sense, with mobilities and residencies, co-productions, all kind of European exchange. But then, of course, it's also in European themes. So when we look a little bit around on the different themes, it's about architectural policies, it's about the future of tourism, it's about sustainability, it's about participation, and all this is also European. It's not only local. It's not only something you are doing in your own city, it's something many, many cities everywhere in Europe are doing. And the European capitals of culture allow for a related exchange, for a related peer learning, for related cooperation, benchmarking or stealing good practices. We can also name it like that. So benefit from all these brain food you can get everywhere. Also in outreach, connecting citizens on a European level. We had many projects also in European capitals that tend to try out new methods also, really to connect citizens on a European level. Of course, they should be involved also in your program, but on the other hand, to go far beyond. We talked already about management, the communication part, but there is a lot more of international and European exchange related to that. It's interns from other ECoCs, it's job shadowing activities, it's exchanges on management practices, it's common initiatives like a recent one, the ECoCs in Dubai, for example. You have maybe followed that a little bit or maybe even participated. And also, of course, policy-related cooperation. So we speak in the bid books about capacities to deliver, but this is also about political commitment. And then there are also, for example, meetings of mayors in order to go ahead with the ECoC project, also to have high-level interventions. I think there is also several elements we still need to take into consideration, and this goes now beyond the ECoC context. So I first wanted to provide a little bit the context of the ECoCs and to link that also to all these different dimensions of European and international cooperation. But in general, European and international cooperation has a lot of different layers, dimensions, dimensions and considerations to be taken into account, like the narratives, like policies. I will then also specify these elements. Then also the principles of cooperation, how you do cooperation. There are specific operational frameworks, and then the different management aspects, like, for example, what we are talking more today is the partnership. Let's go to the narratives and let's reflect a little bit on that. There is no specific slide. So just to understand that there is so many ways to tell the story of European or international cooperation. So it can be historic ties. Just when I look at Fran, there is so many family relations, but it can be also something more official, like the Francophonie, and then there is Institute of Francophonie, and then there is programs, there is activities. All these can be used in a way. All these can be integrated also then in European programs. There is geographic links which can play a role. So when we are just in this area, we are having, for example, Danube strategy or Danube River in general. Then there can be also, of course, economic interest. We have here also a lady responsible for merchandising. So when we speak about relations in the context of creative industries, there is lots of possibilities to link that also maybe to bigger commercial spaces like the European Union, but also like Mercosur. So there is so many talking points where these projects can be also enhanced and brought on a broader perspective. Then on policies, there is so many tools and methods which are used and which can be then also used for the own projects or to which we can link. So for example, international strategies like the New Silk Road, for example, or the whole diplomacy initiatives, cultural diplomacy, scientific diplomacy. For example, with Rijeka 2020, I did a project in the framework of a big European cultural diplomacy conference. We made a workshop between European and African capitals of culture where also participants from Western were involved. So we can link that to so many elements. The same also again, free trade agreements. Then we can also have below state level internationalization, for example, from the World Culture Cities, a big network of big metropolises doing research work together, doing programs together, international organizations. I look again to France with UNESCO, for example, who was working also for UNESCO, and then internationalization with NGOs and umbrella organizations. So the whole networks we are having, also the music sector, for example. Or there is, of course, also we will have during the break additional program with Culture Action Europe. So there is a lot of activities, and of course individual plans and strategies like the international strategy for my company InfoValley or the internationalization strategy from InterArts. So in that sense, what is important for me at the very beginning, that we get a wide picture, that we see that there are lots of opportunities beyond kind of what we have often in mind when we speak about artistic and cultural exchange. It's often so we bring an artist or we have some mobility. It goes far beyond. We can think it far broader and wider, and especially the ECoC project allows for a broad thinking because it's cross-sectoral, it's broad in that sense. It has so many social, economic, cultural, urban development, economic dimensions, so that we are having really, I would say, a shelf full of options and opportunities. Then related to the, and I think I will be much too long, and then I think related to EU policies. It's also a very important advantage we are having in the framework of European Capital of Culture, because European cooperation and integration is at the heart of EU policies. And in that sense, we are in an extremely privileged situation in Europe, because normally cultural operators, they are having a local level where they operate, and then in some countries a regional level, and but most often it's local and national level. But in Europe, we are having in addition the EU level, and the EU level is already meant for European cooperation, and has a full set of instruments and of activities in place on which we can build on all these cross-border, transnational, Europe-wide activities. And in addition, we have, and exactly now, it's a moment where we are extremely privileged related to that, we are having again the funding instruments available for the next 7 years. So in that sense, if we compare that also with rich areas like Northern America, we are in a very privileged situation. We have a wealth of funding instruments, a wealth of structures and of activities already in place, which we just need to choose and to contact and to work on. And in that sense, I think it's a very nice framework. And we are having lots of interesting priority topics on EU level. So when I look at the different cultural policies, we have, for example, still a lot of ongoing activities in cultural heritage, which gained a lot of interest also related to the European Year of Cultural Heritage in 2018. In music, we are having big strategic projects with Music Moves Europe. In creative industries, we are having, for example, the new European Bauhaus initiative connecting with architecture and design, new materials, and also with sustainability, mobility. We are having programs like iPortunos, etc., etc. In addition, there is a cultural strategy for Europe. That means we are having also there a clear framework on which we can build on, a work plan for culture from the EU member states, where they have their priority, for example, also sustainability in cultural heritage or the status of the artist in order to have good working conditions. Also building culture and architecture. So lots and lots of things. And all this also allows, again, for European and international activities in the framework of a European Capital of Culture. Because in all these areas is research activities, is conferences, is publications, is networks, is expert exchange. So I think it's more getting difficult to choose where maybe to put the focus on, but there are lots and lots of opportunities, and with this very special situation of the European continent. And this brings me also to another strategic paper on EU level. This is the EU Strategy for International Cultural Relations. This one was published in 2016, and it explicitly foresees also beyond Europe cooperation of the European capitals of culture. So we will have also guests this afternoon from Canada, for example, but also we did already activities in Asia, in East Asia, related to this policy priority, and also in Africa, for example. So in that sense, also to see Europe in the context of the wider global perspective is clearly a will on the EU level, and also in that sense foreseen and welcome. So that means this makes the boxes of opportunities even bigger, as already said before. Then I'm coming now to more practical things, principle, operational frameworks, and partnerships. And when we see the principles, there is already from the way how we are doing European cooperation projects, and this is also something we will then further elaborate also on Friday, that there is a clear will here to have a really integrative approach, so that we work on co-design co-design cooperation projects, co-creation, to do things together, yeah, beyond inviting, really developing projects together. Then there is also an upcoming discussion to do these projects in a participative governance way. Yeah, so to get rid of the stronger and of the weaker parts in a project, to work as equal partners with transparency and also fair financial flows. There is an increasing also reflection on the global dimension of all what we do also in local projects, for example, also related to sustainable development goals. And there is, and I look again at Fran, you are having very important topics in your agenda. It's the respect of cultural diversity and also of cultural rights, and that this should be also reflected in all projects of European and international cooperation. Then what we have also discussed, and still to remain in these more operative elements, is the pandemic. And the pandemic influenced considerably, of course, all what is European and international cooperation, very heavily, partly in 2020 with border closings, but still traveling is more complicated. It's sometimes more expensive depending where you are going. Sometimes you need additional tests. And what we also have, and I think this is a crucial element, is that we are having a weakening of many cultural organizations and also freelancers. And these are these people we also need in order to build up big programs. And we know also that organizations need to be have to have a certain stability in order to be able also to go international, because international or also European normally takes more time, can have a need of additional resources. And so in that sense, it's maybe also a question how to reinforce local cultural organizations and sectors in order to empower them also in this pandemic context to still go international and to still do European projects. Then in addition, we are having a whole framework related to mobility. So mobility is crucial. We want to meet. So all the European projects in a way or in another will be then linked to mobility. And there we, on the one hand, again, we are very privileged in Europe that we are having a whole ecosystem in place, for example, with mobility information points and with a whole set of networks and assistance and support. But on the other hand, we are still having bureaucracy, we are having troubles with visa, depending who is traveling. And of course, there is also an upcoming discussion about sustainable mobility, how to do that, but still to allow mobility, because it's also about cultural rights. So this is also something which is very, very crucial. And then there is also a certain political framework which can make European cooperation and international cooperation more or less complicated. But what we have also seen now, again related to the pandemic, that the funds for international cooperation which are provided on national level have rather tendency to be lower than before. Yeah, so because there is this observation, there is less mobility, so maybe also less need for funds. When we speak then about management, this has many dimensions, maybe just to give some keywords. It's about motivation, it's about skills, it's about partners, financing, it's about planning, it's about methods, it's about governance, it's about communication and evaluation. And all this also applies on project and on organizational level. And so this is also, and I refer again to what I have said at the beginning, we cannot do it all. Yeah, so we could discuss about all this for many, many days. So our focus will be on partners, financing and communication. And in partnership, we thought we make 2-3 focal points. One is really to further stress the fact that there are so many possibilities to cooperate within the European capitals of culture and cultural capitals of the world. So this will be Steve Green, who will provide us additional insight into these elements, and I think he's already online and waiting for his intervention in a few minutes. Then we will have Heidi Vogels, who will speak about networks and residencies also, and how to further cooperate. And then I'm very happy again with Victoria being with us from the Veszprém Puppet Theatre, and who will give very practical local insights about her way of doing projects, and also to show that many elements can be developed also on local level. And in the afternoon, we will then have the Canada Arts Council, who will provide us with further insights about concrete cooperation opportunities with Canada. And this brings me also to another strategic paper on EU level. This is the EU Strategy for International Cultural Relations. This one was published in 2016, and it explicitly foresees also beyond Europe cooperation of the European capitals of culture. So we will have also guests this afternoon from Canada, for example, but also we did already activities in Asia, in East Asia, related to this policy priority, and also in Africa, for example. So in that sense, also to see Europe in the context of the wider global perspective is clearly a will on the EU level, and also in that sense foreseen and welcome. So that means this makes the boxes of opportunities even bigger, as already said before. Then I'm coming now to more practical things, principle, operational frameworks, and partnerships. And when we see the principles, there is already from the way how we are doing European cooperation projects, and this is also something we will then further elaborate also on Friday, that there is a clear will here to have a really integrative approach, so that we work on co-design co-design cooperation projects, co-creation, to do things together, yeah, beyond inviting, really developing projects together. Then there is also an upcoming discussion to do these projects in a participative governance way. Yeah, so to get rid of the stronger and of the weaker parts in a project, to work as equal partners with transparency and also fair financial flows. There is an increasing also reflection on the global dimension of all what we do also in local projects, for example, also related to sustainable development goals. And there is, and I look again at Fran, you are having very important topics in your agenda. It's the respect of cultural diversity and also of cultural rights, and that this should be also reflected in all projects of European and international cooperation. Then what we have also discussed, and still to remain in these more operative elements, is the pandemic. And the pandemic influenced considerably, of course, all what is European and international cooperation, very heavily, partly in 2020 with border closings, but still traveling is more complicated. It's sometimes more expensive depending where you are going. Sometimes you need additional tests. And what we also have, and I think this is a crucial element, is that we are having a weakening of many cultural organizations and also freelancers. And these are these people we also need in order to build up big programs. And we know also that organizations need to be have to have a certain stability in order to be able also to go international, because international or also European normally takes more time, can have a need of additional resources. And so in that sense, it's maybe also a question how to reinforce local cultural organizations and sectors in order to empower them also in this pandemic context to still go international and to still do European projects. Then in addition, we are having a whole framework related to mobility. So mobility is crucial. We want to meet. So all the European projects in a way or in another will be then linked to mobility. And there we, on the one hand, again, we are very privileged in Europe that we are having a whole ecosystem in place, for example, with mobility information points and with a whole set of networks and assistance and support. But on the other hand, we are still having bureaucracy, we are having troubles with visa, depending who is traveling. And of course, there is also an upcoming discussion about sustainable mobility, how to do that, but still to allow mobility, because it's also about cultural rights. So this is also something which is very, very crucial. And then there is also a certain political framework which can make European cooperation and international cooperation more or less complicated. But what we have also seen now, again related to the pandemic, that the funds for international cooperation which are provided on national level have rather tendency to be lower than before. Yeah, so because there is this observation, there is less mobility, so maybe also less need for funds. When we speak then about management, this has many dimensions, maybe just to give some keywords. It's about motivation, it's about skills, it's about partners, financing, it's about planning, it's about methods, it's about governance, it's about communication and evaluation. And all this also applies on project and on organizational level. And so this is also, and I refer again to what I have said at the beginning, we cannot do it all. Yeah, so we could discuss about all this for many, many days. So our focus will be on partners, financing and communication. And in partnership, we thought we make 2-3 focal points. One is really to further stress the fact that there are so many possibilities to cooperate within the European capitals of culture and cultural capitals of the world. So this will be Steve Green, who will provide us additional insight into these elements, and I think he's already online and waiting for his intervention in a few minutes. Then we will have Heidi Vogels, who will speak about networks and residencies also, and how to further cooperate, and that I'm very happy again with Victoria being with us from the Veszprém Puppet Theatre, and who will give very practical local insights about her way of doing a project, and also to show that many elements can be developed also on local level. And in the afternoon, we will then have the Canada Arts Council, who will provide us with further insights about concrete cooperation opportunities with Canada.
Who am I? Steve Green. Why am I here? I suppose it's because I spent 5 years on the selection panel, and I chaired it for 3 years. I have 150 bid books for my sins, and 149 presentations for my deeper sins. And also 4 years ago, I wrote a paper, I'll give you the details later, on all the capitals of culture around the world. The ECoC is not alone. And since leaving the panel 5 years ago, I've occasionally helped candidates, never got paid, but I've helped them, and taken part in workshops on capitals of culture, not just in Europe, but around the world. So that's who I am. I have to explain my background. It has a slight relevance. Many of you may recognize it as a David Hockney painting of a rather expensive swimming pool and house in Los Angeles. The difference is that the people in the painting are not the very rich, artistic-minded, culturally-minded people that Hockney painted, but the cleaners who can't afford to go to the arts. It's a very nice, sort of subtle, technical, political painting. It also works with, as Sylvia said, outreach and audience development. So what am I going to talk about? It says on the agenda how best to cooperate with capitals of culture outside and within Europe. In practice, I'm going to expand it to cover some of the issues that Sylvia has just talked about and give practical links and background to some of the other organizations working in the fields within both culture and within the narratives, as Sylvia said. Why is this important now? I think it is because it's a cliche to say we're in a period of change. We've always been in a period of change since the Neolithic age. But now, in the next decade or so, the world has to change, or the change will hit the world. Yes, COP26 occupied most of our thoughts in the last few weeks. Climate emergency, the breakdown of politics in many parts of the world, including Central Europe. And I think ECoCs will not be able just to carry on within their nice, comfortable parameters as they did in the 1990s, 2000s, and even the 2010s. An interesting point was made by Barbara Gessler, who heads the unit in the European Commission, which looks after the ECoCs. There was a meeting at the European Parliament last week. And one of the points she made about ECoCs was that the European Union now has 3 overriding objectives for the next 7 years or so. And these permeate all activities of the Union. And she said it in a way quite deliberately that said, these 3 add to the objectives and competencies of ECoCs. It expands the objectives beyond the 6 criteria you all went through to get selected. So I will look later on at some of the ways these avenues can be explored. No PowerPoint, I tend to dislike them, but I have prepared speaking notes, which I'll send to Sylvia for distribution afterwards. What I'm going to talk about is in 3 sections: basic, intermediate, advanced. So let's start with the basic. the ECoC family. You all link with your fellow ECoCs, with candidates from your own countries sometimes, with ECoCs from previous manifestations, and sometimes some still to come. There's the ECoC family meetings twice a year. Sometimes these links are more than simple visits. They're critical for learning. What are you doing? How did you get over this problem? Did you really have that problem with your ministry? How do you deal with that blank, blank, blank mayor? The common problems of ECoCs: politics, the ego of the mayor, the incompetence and misunderstanding by ministries of culture. These are all useful and essential, and to a large extent happen. So I'm going to move on. One, of course, network that your local university, or at least one of them, will join the university network of capitals of culture. And indeed, the Veszprém University, the University of Pannonia, is the current hosting the secretariat. So their website is very useful to find sometimes rather obscure academic type papers. They are universities after all. But there's experience sometimes comes through of, oh, that could be helpful, as well as theory of cultural policy, which is for a completely different planet. But are these enough? No, in my view. At the intermediate level, I go back to say the ECoC is not alone. Since the European City of Culture program was founded in 1985 in Athens, thanks to Melina McCurry and Jacques Lang, there have been 37 other programs around the world. Now, these are what I call programs. They're not when a city itself jumps up with its marketing department and says, we're a cultural capital. Now, there's several thousand cities try to claim that. But these are where there is some sort of organization behind the designation. Now, some of them only lasted once. Ireland, Korea. Others only lasted a few editions, 2 or 3. Why did they stop? Politics. A new political party took over the government or the regional government and had different priorities. The 37 have been organized by intergovernmental networks like the European Union, the Asian Association of Asian Nations, the South Asian Regional Cooperation, the Commonwealth of Independent States, the former Soviet Union minus the Democrats. The others have been organized by national governments, by regional governments, and in a couple of cases by NGOs, and in 2 by a private individual who's established a very long-running series for 2 capitals of culture, and very profitably. Each year, there's probably around 20 to 25 other capitals of culture. Some are very limited. They're not much more than an arts festival organized around a ministerial meeting. That's a government meeting. Others do nothing. In the Organization of Islamic States, they nominated 3 or 4 cities over the next decade in 2015, and many of the cities now are reaching their nomination are somewhat surprised that they are nominated and finish up doing nothing. Others do an enormous program. Most of them are very small, certainly compared to the ECoC, and many of them have budgets of less than 5 million euros. Let me give you some examples which have already started. The Union of Capital Cities of Ibero-America. That mostly is in South America. Mexico City is the one this year. Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, which is probably the international network with the biggest trajectory towards the European Union. The Arab League and the Organization of Islamic Countries through their respective regional UNESCO branches, independent branches, but shadowing UNESCO. the Commonwealth and the Turkic Council, which covers the Turkic-speaking world. And I noticed that the chief executive who runs their Turksoy organization visited Novi Sad earlier this year. At national level, it's interesting to learn that Canada will be speaking this afternoon, as they were the first country outside the EU to run a program. And it was a very innovative one, and one I think the EU can learn for post-2033, when the current decision ends. The Canada program had 3 levels: small communities, medium communities, and large cities, which meant you didn't have a small city of 20,000 in competition with a 4 million city. Lithuania was the first EU country to jump on the bandwagon, followed by the UK, Italy, Slovakia, Ukraine, and next year, France. Regional ones have been very interesting. There's a very interesting one in ISO Atlantico. I see you desperately searching Google to find out where ISO Atlantico is. It's the EU region made up of northern Portugal and Galicia in Spain, a cross-border region. Krasnoyarsk in Russia, in Siberia, has a very good program. And interestingly, now London has a competition between its boroughs. As a city of 8 million, it doesn't need much cultural support, but individual boroughs, mostly with populations of 300,000, swamp most ECoCs. At NGO level, I'll mention the one which I find the most fascinating when we come to the term culture, which is the Finno-Ugric, which is a non-political based administrative, not even administrative area, but it's a pure cultural area extending from Estonia through Hungary out through Russia. And that has a very interesting Capital of Culture program with a very severe selection process. And Catalan, I will mention, I have to be living in Spain, unfortunately, but this is one of the 2 with the American one, which is run by a private individual and has, although it reads as though it is a mirror image of the ECoC, in fact is a private person without any competition, but he traipses around both Catalonia and the Americas asking for money to run for the privilege of holding a title. It's the first private sector ECoC or ECoC. So to look at a few examples, the UK one I'm starting with, partly because it's unique, it runs every 4 years, not every year. And its budget and its operations and its objectives is the closest to an ECoC. Coventry, the current holder, was held the title for this year, but when COVID came along, it split the year. So it started in May this year and will run until May next year, and has managed to get a full program in, unlike poor Galway and Rijeka. It also has the most innovative Capital of Culture budget program that I've seen for many years, which is really engaging with citizens in the country, in the city, and not simply those who normally turn up to arts events or a big jamboree in the city centre. Its budget is also over 35 million euros. 2 years' time, Leeds will not be a city of culture, and it will not be a European capital of culture because that disaster called Brexit stopped it from bidding. But it's running virtually all its program anyway, because it felt the program was worth running regardless of not being able to be in the EU. Again, its budget is going to be over 30 million euros. The next UK one is in 2025, and the current shortlist of 8 cities will know who wins next year in May. The latest one to launch their program for next year is in Italy, where an island, first time an island has held a title, Procida, just outside Naples. It launched its program this week with 150 events, 350 artists from 45 countries. It's going to be one of the best Italian cities of culture. Its catchphrase is international dimension, inclusion, and eco-sustainability are the key words. In a framework of poetry and active participation of citizens. I think many ECoCs could pick up those words. In 2023, there are 2 Italian capitals of culture in a twin approach, Bergamo and Brescia. And why are there 2? And why did they not have a competition? It's because last year they were the 2 Italian cities hardest hit in the first wave of COVID. And the selection for the 2024 city is now underway. Lithuania, Ukraine, Slovakia have small cities of culture, which probably from an ECoC point of view are good in regional context rather than long distance. Bursa, the third city in Turkey, often overlooked, is the Turkic capital of culture. These ones sometimes have an extremely good program, other times rather late and hurriedly put together. But as I mentioned, they've already made overtures to Novi Sad, and I hope to other ECoCs in the Central Europe to make increased partnerships. Further afield, their previous cities of culture were basically tourist promotion activities, which is one of the banes, I think, of an ECoC, that cities just see it as a tourist marketing promotion rather than a fundamental change. In my view, as I've said quite frequently, bidding for an ECoC means that the organisers think that the cultural sector in their city is not fit for the next 5 or 6 years, at least, and that the cultural sector in the city, far from just simply being a promotion tool, needs to radically change. I liked on the selection of Novi Sad, for example, where they told us, the committee, the selection panel, that most of the arts in their city is just Serbian, and that the arts managers in the city just thought nationally. And any international activity just meant Serbs living in Croatia, which didn't really help matters. And that one of the aims of the ECoC of Novi Sad was to internationalize the cultural managers in the city, hopefully before they are retired. There are 2 new ECoCs starting roughly next year. One, and I think probably during the couple of days, Sylvia can tell you more, is in Africa. There was a slight controversy last year when Marrakesh initially held the title and then it was stolen by Rabat. But Rabat holds the title this year and next year. And the aim was that the next African capital of culture will be in 2 or 3 years' time. In the EU, France at last, after many years of trying, launched its capital of culture. And the first edition is next year. And a town called Villeurbanne will hold it, which is, if you look on the map, people may mistake it, and I'm going to get shot by their residents, as a suburb of Lyon. But it's an independent city. The French competition again was good because it limited applicants to cities between 20,000 and 200,000. And as I mentioned with Canada before, I think this is something the EU has to explore after 2033, of what size of cities can compete to make a European impact rather than necessarily a local one. The mayor of Villeurbanne said, "We did not want to offer a succession of events that shine to the moon. We are almost lost on that." I think that's a very good point nowadays. But we didn't go into an excess of place marketing. We won't be in city breaks. However, we have a story to tell to those who will pass by. It is a space of possibilities and utopias. And I think that's a very brave statement in the light of how many people talk and indeed think of ECoCs and capitals of culture. The ones around the world, outside of the European dimension area, vary tremendously. The Arab capital of culture at times is really good and gives a very good, artistically centered program. Luxor in Egypt a couple of years ago was extremely good. Others are victims of the politics. So Al-Quds, or Jerusalem, was underwhelming, to say the least, because of the politics. The Islamic capital of culture can be brilliant. Marshed in Iran 3 years ago did a fantastic program. It's the third city in Shia Muslim Islam, and it did a wonderful program of artistic events with a heavy emphasis, as the title involves, on Islamic arts, history, calligraphy, culture, architecture. But some Islamic ones just fade into nothing. The American title people look at and tend to think, oh, there's an American capital of culture program. It's nothing like any others. It's run by this private individual, and he basically asked them to pay anything from 20 to 200,000 euros to join. Now I'll move on very quickly to the advanced, and this is where I'm going to pick up some of the points that came in Sylvia's introduction on narratives and international dimension. You probably know about EU sport and EU youth programs and titles. But there are several now relatively new ones, which I think are more relevant to join partnership with. The EU Green Capital is an obvious one to move. It's Grenoble next year and Tallinn, next ECoC the year after. And here, for those who, I think, eco-sustainability, the climate emergency must be fundamental to every ECoC now. It would be very, very disappointing if a future ECoC does not really manage its own emissions, does not really say how we are cutting our emissions and behaving sustainably. Not just awareness programs in the arts world, but as a practical management tool. Smart tourism is a new EU program. Innovation, accessibility, and sustainability are the future of tourism. So your tourism boards and people really need to get engaged with these. A very nice one just starting is the EU Access Award, which is for those with disabilities. And again, this goes back to the ECoC intention of outreach and audience development. How can your citizens actually get to arts events without bad transport into the city centre where the arts facilities are, or having to walk upstairs in a simple one within a museum? Chongqing in Sweden is this year, was last year's, the next year programme will be announced in December. And then 3 on the creative industry side. Valencia, where I live, is the World Design Capital next year, a title held every 2 years. UNESCO Creative Cities are an obvious area, and I think various ECoCs have them already members of one of the categories of the UNESCO team. And the Council of Europe Intercultural Cities, which I think is fundamental now, that as we become more and more integrated within society, with the exception of a few certain political leaders who are living in the 18th century, but as Europe becomes more multicultural, assimilated, multicultural, you take your pick, we are no longer the white Christian bastion of the 17th century. So the Council of Europe's Intercultural Cities are a key one. And to summarize, before I run out of time, I've already run out of time, an ECoC city will appear in the European Commission's Cultural and Creative Cities Monitor, a publication every 2 years, which looks at now 190 European cities and assesses them on a wide range of factors. And these illustrate, not in a competitive sense, but in a comparative sense, just how integrated culture and creativity is in cities. It's good for peer comparisons and to wake your mayors up and politicians up to see what culture and creativity actually mean in today's world. You don't need an ECoC to promote your own city. I was very disappointed looking at the front page of one. I think they'll probably be in the room at the moment, where there was virtually no mention of bringing Europe into the city so that the citizens know the diversity of cultures. Notice the plural in the EU or in Europe at the moment. Successfully, ECoCs by any stretch of the imagine have over 50% of their events with non-national participation, co-creation, inviting in, multiple workshops. It's the diversity of cultures in the EU that need to be celebrated, not single cultures. So what I hope I've done is given an overview of some of the other organizations and areas where you can go for partnerships. When, as Sylvia said again, you settle the focus on what you're doing. My own approach would be the focus for the next, well, forever, but certainly for ECoCs from now until 2033, is that ecological sustainability must be first and foremost on all of your programs and in all of your individual events.
I'm working for Trans Artists, that's part of Dutch culture. And Trans Artists is an organization that is dedicated to collect information about artist residency programs that are spread all over the world. And we do that through our website. That's our main tool. This is an online database of residency programs, and we have collected so far around 1,500 different programs that are listed here. And this is the way how we think, like artists, we try to open up these opportunities for artists so they can browse through the website and the database and see what kind of programs can be interesting for them. That is, we were founded in 1996, so we have been around already quite for some time. That means that we are not the only ones who offer information about residency programs, but yeah, at least we kind of grew into the process also of how so many more residencies came to be during the last 20 years. So that is nice also that we have this overview, or this helicopter view in a way, concerning the different networks and also the different programs that are around. I think also what is interesting to start with a really basic question is, what is actually a residency program? What makes residencies interesting, I think, is that they are, they start from this notion for artists to be allowed to work some other place for a certain amount of time. And when you have that covered, then basically everything is possible. And that means that you have residencies that are like functioning like a big inside of a big institution that allow artists a stepping stone for their careers. So you can think, for example, at Schloss Solitude in Germany or the Rijksakademie in Amsterdam. But you also have residency programs that are part of exhibition spaces or projects that are set up by small independent initiatives or run by artists that are part of a studio building. And you also have residencies that are looking for more unusual places, like this container ship, for example. This is an example of a residency that is, the organization is based in Canada. And some years ago, they managed to have residency on the board of a container ship. So artists could take a ride and sail or like go with the ship all over the world and make their projects from that context. And I think that is interesting in a way because it gives an example of how as a residency can open up a space inside of an existing context and allowing an artist to land there and to work and produce from inside, allowing us in that sense also an inside view through their projects about maybe sort of some worlds that are normally not accessible or are not really on our scope. So in that sense, I think you can see a residency almost like a political tool as well. It just depends how the organizers wish to, what ambitions they have, and where you want to focus on. So what residencies mostly have in common is this focus. Oh, sorry, here we see the database, slide of the database, and I will move already with my story a little bit elsewhere. What I would like to stress is that residencies are always with this focus on artistic development and research instead of presentation and just for the outside world for people to encounter with art. Is more for the artistic development and also for connecting with the context of a place. So that already has this element of sustainability, of course, in itself with it. And that is something that has been there always. And that can also be, I think, our focus when we want to move into the future, and to how can we utilize residencies also from that aspect. So if you can think of residencies like that, then they can become a catalyst for receiving guests, a catalyst for encounters and exchange, production and presentation. And they're always well embedded in the cultural and social fabric of a place. Then another aspect from residencies is the perspective of the organization. This is where Air Platform NL comes in, at least from our side of trans artists. Air Platform NL is a network of residency organizations in the Netherlands and also Flanders. And we have started this also many years ago as a way to support organizations of residency programs to come together and to create a context for meeting, exchange, and visibility towards one another, but also towards the outside world. And this also allows for investing into a more fertile environment for these programs also to thrive and to connect with each other and to support them in their programs. So from the beginning also what Air Platform NL did is that we focused not just on bringing them together, but also to explore how can we bring those different networks of residencies together. So there is also more exchange between other countries. So we started with a focus, for example, between the Netherlands and Belgium, and we organized programs and bus tours and symposia with our neighbors in Germany, with the Ruhr area. And to always from this focus, like how can you build up relationships that that really are going to thrive. So you could think of organizing a meeting, just one meeting, and you go back home and it was fantastic and you were inspired. But you can also think of building up programs over the course of a couple of years. So you allow a certain discourse that you start with each other or exchange you have with each other to take place in different stages. And well, at least in our experience, that can, if you manage to incorporate that in your programs and in your projects, that allows for things more to solidify, I think. And that is also a certain way to invest in the future, to you create a situation of familiarity between each other and affinity. So you can, you know where to find each other also for other projects and for other questions, or you create a more, I think, sustainable and flexible working environment. So we did that also with Russia, for example, and that's in some years ago. That was a project that we explored different regions in Russia, visited that also with other residencies, and also invited those residencies back to the Netherlands. And that was actually taking place over the course of 4 years. And I think that was, of course, also quite exceptional because funding doesn't always allow to develop projects that reach more into the future. So it's always a strategy of going step by step each time, looking for different opportunities to bring the financing from different sides together to make it happen. So that is, I think, that always has been the challenge, and that probably also will remain like that in the future. talking about that part of sustainability, and we can of course not neglect the current situation that we are in, the current crisis concerning COVID and what the effects are for mobility, but also for how we organize ourselves and how do we relate and present ourselves in context of our society, but also inside of the cultural sector. And for that, I would like to also point out, I think it can be interesting to connect with other platforms and networks that are already working on that in smaller groups. And I'm not sure if you have already, that already came about in your program, but I would like to mention in this context also Reshape, which is a European project that unfortunately just already finished up for 3 years. This brought together different cultural practitioners from Europe and Southern Mediterranean region to investigate together how can you bottom up develop different strategies to change the narrative of how cultural production takes place. And tapping into their knowledge, we organize, for example, next week in Rotterdam, hopefully, because the lockdown measures are starting to become more tight also here in the Netherlands. We have invited one of the people who was connected in the Reshape network to talk about this and to open up a conversation. And they used the Tarot tool. It's a Tarot deck that they developed especially for that, as one of the many tools that they did, to go into conversation with each other, with the residency organizers that will be there as well. The Reshape doesn't exist anymore, but they have a network, or the platform is a website as well, and they have very well documented all their different working groups that they had and the outcomes of these sessions that they had over the 3 years. So that is that I wanted to mention as well. So when we talk about how to invest in creating sustainable networks, I think the most important thing is to really look what is close to home from the perspective, or from an international perspective, but also how those two are always intertwined. So in that sense, connect to your region, invest in relationships with colleagues that are in that region, and also between the different regions in the, for example, in European context.
I have to tell you that the everyday topics and tasks that we do are becoming more and more complex. So it is a busy time of the life of the institution that I represent. Oh, and also maybe it is important that I'm the deputy director of the theater and also the dramaturg. And I was responsible for international relations for many years. But before I start to tell you all about our plans, let me shortly introduce you my institution. I know that for many of you, this is already an old story, but not all of you have heard about Kabuca. So we are both a city and a government-funded cultural institution located in the Haskovo area of the city. Our company consists of 21 company members. And I know that for many of you in the audience and also in front of the cameras, this seems to be a quite big institutions, but honestly, in the field of Hungary and according to the system of the Hungarian cultural institutions, this is rather a medium-sized institution. So we mainly play for young audiences. We offer theater plays for babies, for kindergarten pupils, and for elementary students. But we believe that puppetry is a form of art that can address all ages, so even teenagers and adults. So it was a very nice moment when the theatrical concept of the local ECoC team also engaged this idea. So thank you very much for that. Kabuca produces 5 to 6 new productions every theatrical season. And we are very proud that we have our own workhouse where we produce our own costumes, props, and puppets. We have a sewing lady who's been working with us for nearly 20 years now, and also talented carpenters, and we invite designers for our productions. Our artistic team is made of the 7 puppeteers and myself. And I've been working for the theater since 2013. Our theater started out as an amateur group during the 90s. And it became an official institution in 2001. So this means that we are proudly celebrating our 20th anniversary this season. Unfortunately, of course, the huge celebrations for the public were washed away by the pandemics, but we try to find some alternative ways to remind ourselves of our history. So we organized an interactive and online exhibition, and our anniversary book is actually being published right at the moment when I speak. So you may wonder what kabocha means. It is the tiny insect called cicada in English. It is not the nicest creature, but its name has a nice local sound in Hungarian. And I also know people who say that it makes a nice sound. I am not sure that all of you share this opinion, but it is a challenge even for us as a professional institution and a bunch of creative people to really identify ourselves with this nice or maybe not so nice creature. So even during the last and short 20 years, we were struggling to find our visual identity. Here you can find the logos that we've been working with in the last couple of years. And it is still under construction and also under development, but we lately decided that we are going to concentrate on the wings. So it is an abstract symbol that we use, and we really want to learn how to fly with that. Fly beyond our boundaries and challenges and over borders. We also organize our outdoor festival called Kabocha Family Festival, which is an open air event on several days. And as the title suggests, it aims to satisfy every family member with different art repertoire. During the ECoC years, our goal is to open this festival up for the international artists and audiences. And this development is one of our biggest dreams for the upcoming years. Let me show you a short video just to give you an insight of what the atmosphere of the festival has. And now about our international relations. So we are very privileged that we are invited to go and perform abroad on a regular basis. We have strong connections with our neighbor countries. For example, we work together with Timișoara, with the Ciki Gergely State Theatre. We believe that it is a unique opportunity that different ECoC cities share the same language in the same year. So when it turned out that Timișoara's ECoC year is delayed, we immediately started to work together and to produce co-productions with the Romanian Puppet Theatre. At the end of February in 2022, we will have the premiere of Bankban, one of our biggest national dramas, in which we invited several actors from the Csiki Gergely Theatre, and also Petőfi, the local drama theatre, is a co-productional partner in that project. The rehearsals will be both in Veszprém and in Timișoara, so this is not an easy task during COVID. So let's cross our fingers that the borders will not be closed down again. But this is a contemporary example of working internationally, and let me just tell you the story how we all started to work on an international level. So this is the time when I have to mention the name of Karel van Ransbeck. He is a Belgian director, and he had a huge influence on our theater. Karel is the artistic director of Theater de Spiegel, a small theater in Antwerpen, but he used to study in Hungary, actually, at the State Puppet Theatre, and he knows a lot about the Hungarian puppetry traditions. He met Andreas Székely, our former director in that school, and 20 years later, he was invited to work with our company. He produced the show Hadede in 2010, and according to the concept, we were planning two versions of the performance. One of them was supposed to be premiered in Antwerp, and one of them with the Hungarian cast in Veszprém. But Karel decided that the Hungarian team was more creative and efficient, so he then cancelled his own premiere in his own theater, and then he just started to focus on us, which was really a great honor. The show was a non-verbal performance, and it only used sounds and music as for the acoustics, and the puppets were abstract and non-figurative creatures. There was not a strict narrative to follow, and the actions on stage focused on general themes as the dynamics between the performance, for example. Hadede became such a huge success that it was invited to several festivals, and it toured in many countries and also in many continents. So the actors performed nearly 60 shows abroad, which is a high number according to our level. These tours were organized between 2010 and 2016. And the first and one of the most important things we learned from that was that for a theater who gets invited to foreign countries, it is a necessity to have someone in the staff who is responsible for international relations. So since 2012, we always had a staff member actually who was responsible for the organizations of these tours and for the applications of the festivals. And sometimes this really seemed to be a luxurious thing, but actually it became very crucial even nowadays. So yes, here you can see the different countries where Hadede was invited. But just to give you some other examples of our recent tours. So our production Regulatem was also invited to the United States in 2018. We performed in Los Angeles and in San Francisco for the Hungarian minorities. We were also invited by the Kaunas National Theatre for their festival Dive into the Theatre, where we had to find a solution to overcome the language barriers. We performed two of our shows. One of them is titled Koju Ukila the Witch. For this occasion, we involved a young actor from the Lithuanian staff who gave live narration on the story while our actor performed. And we even brought a copy of the costume that was given to this young man. So the entire presence of the interpreter on stage was involved in the performance. So we had rehearsals before that, and it was really a huge success, and the children really loved the effort. And the other show, you can see a picture of that, is a non-verbal performance, so it was not that difficult to enjoy for the Lithuanian children. So we stayed at this festival for 9 days, arrived home after a 24-hour-long bus drive on the 9th of May 2020, and a week later the lockdown started because of COVID, and it was unbelievable actually to leave the curfew and all the regulations just a couple of days after all the nice experiences we had in a very international group of people. So working on an international level also meant that we became members of international organizations during the years. It made our work more efficient because of these networks really share information. So information became very available. We learned a lot on funding possibilities, festival applications and workshops. And we simply got to know other theaters that were in the similar situations as we are, and we shared the same challenges. So for theaters performing for children, the largest and the most well-known organization is OCITES. I'm sure that many of you already heard about it. We are a member of that as well, but we are not that active because it is a worldwide organization. And most of the times their meetings are not even on this continent, so it was difficult to participate, but let's hope that we will have the chance later on. But there is another organization called Small Size Big Citizens, and this is an Italian-based organization which focuses on the very young audience. La Baracca Testoni Ragazzi developed the methodology and know-how on how to perform for babies who are under the age of 3. Because we perform for babies, and this is just magic. The previously mentioned Karel van Rensbeck is a board director of this organization, and he invited us to become members. Between 2014 and 2018, we were really active. We managed to travel to many of their festivals. We participated in many gatherings and workshops. So, and also they gave us the possibility to invite performances from Italy and the Netherlands, which was a very important step in audience education. It is inspiring for yourself to collect new impressions abroad, but it is also crucial to share as much of these with your audience so they can follow you on your artistic journey. In baby performances, most of the times there is no usage of language. And also not many theaters perform for babies, but if they do, it is very common that they have very light set design, so it is easy to take with you on airplanes and on trains. We didn't know this at the beginning, so when we were invited to go to Taiwan in 2017 with our performance Carnival of Animals, we actually had to have the crew who invited us to reproduce all the stuff that we use in the performance. So we have another set, but this way we didn't have to carry very heavy luggages overseas. So working with international directors and designers is a very nice way to bring new life and new artistic input in our everyday work. But at the beginning, it was very difficult to know and to learn that in order to do that, you have to schedule at least 2 or 3 years ahead. And maybe this is very obvious for you, but this was not easy to learn at the beginning. So even nowadays, when we invite international artists, scheduling is always a huge issue because we have a huge fluctuation of the staff in the theater for many reasons, but it is kind of difficult to keep the promises that we give to involved artists. I was one of the lucky ones who was able to participate in the Tandem Capital of Cultures program in 2019. May I get the next slide, please? And I'm very happy to see that actually on Friday you will have a presentation by Philip and Janakan about the project, so I'm not going to go very much in details with that. But during these 3 international meetings, different professionals from various artistic fields were brought together to connect and to try to develop projects and project ideas together for the ECoC cities. So by the end of the first meeting, we had to find a partner from another ECoC city, and then we had to visit each other. I found a partner from Fries Straat Festival, and I had the chance to visit Leeuwarden twice, and also we traveled together to Belgium for a huge street theater showcase. But it was really surprising that the most creative time and the most inspiring time we spent together with my tandem partner was the time when she visited me in West Bremen. I had to explain her how our theater functions on an everyday level. She met our staff, watched our performances, and she made observations on our challenges from a very different perspective, a perspective I could never have. So I later realized that the artistic project development, which our task was during these meetings, was not only a tool, or it was only a tool. The real goal was for us to connect and to bond in a way. So the tandem connections do exist and function even without the realization of the planned projects. They work on local level as well, because there were 3 representatives from West Bremen selected to participate in this project. So I shared these wonderful journeys with excellent people. And tandem connections work on international level as well. Kobulca works on 2 international projects now with professionals from the tandem team. And I also saw comments from Arda actually in the chat now. So let me just give you some waves and a big hug. So one of these projects is Global Roots. In the next picture, please, which is an Erasmus Plus funded project where artists and teachers and cultural managers work together on creating a healthy and safe learning environment for children who are hit by the climate crisis and catastrophe and have to fight depression. The participating partners are from the Netherlands, from Germany, from Sweden, from Hungary, of course, and the project management team is Culture Prinsen, a Danish organization. A funny twist in this story is that actually I only knew that I know one of the participants from Tandem when we first had our online kickoff meeting. So it was strange to just stare each other in front of the camera and say that, okay, so now we are going to participate in this project again together. So it was really a nice thing. During this 2-year-long project, Corona was, of course, a huge issue, and it made our work more difficult and also much deeper in a way. Because we shortly realized that some of the planned international meetings will be abolished because of the different regulations of the different countries. So we decided to organize online workshops on a regular basis. And an online meeting is actually quite easy to attend. And in a way, we reduced the physical boundaries between each other. So when we finally had the chance to meet each other in West Bremen this September, we greeted each other as we already been good friends. So I know that there will be another presentation on Erasmus Plus later on in this conference. So I'm not going to talk about the structure, how this project goes, but let me emphasize a couple of things which I find interesting in our perspective. So it is always a huge question how to bring home your experiences from abroad, how to involve your colleagues and staff in the adventures you had. Erasmus Plus is a fantastic opportunity because it gives you the chance to involve many people from your institution. So on the job shadowing part, delegate as many people as possible. And this also means that you have to have people who speak languages fluently, but this is also a great opportunity to practice foreign language skills. During a 2-year-long international cooperation, you have to develop real content. It is not just a project plan, it is a detailed content you produce together. In our case, in Global Roots, we developed workshops for students on the topic of sustainability, which we had to realize already in 3 local schools. After these pilot workshops, each of the Erasmus partners presented the methodology they use for each other and also the consequences we had. And now we develop a workshop plan together with all these experiences. We give these test workshops back to the teachers that we used to work with, who are going to involve it in their curriculum, and they give us feedback again, which we can also share again on an international level. So as you can see, there are several steps in order to finalize the end product. The real great thing is that during the fund application, you have to develop a dissemination strategy already. So during the entire process, you have to reflect on the working methods you share together with your partners, and you have a ready-made plan on how to share this knowledge. We are halfway down the road with Global Roots now, but we decided to apply for another Erasmus Plus application for the next 2 years period, because we really want to produce real nice content together with the partners. So I hope I will be able to share this end product with you someday. And in the next dia, I can show you a couple of pictures. These pictures were taken on the job shadowing when we visited Berlin. We worked in a school called Güntiger Grundschule, where our partner SideViews involved us actually in the realization of their workshops. So this school is located in Kreuzberg, Berlin, and we had the chance to work together with children from many countries. And on the other picture, you see the international group, actually when we had our first real life meeting here in Veszprém. So to finalize my thoughts on the lessons we learned from our international cooperations is that every time you have the chance to go abroad or just meet new professionals, it always gives you a new perspective. This perspective can be a new way of how you see others or how you see yourself.
So I've got my essay.
But either way, it is very useful. So hopefully you learn new values, or you realize that you share values with other people whom you just recently got to know. So every time you get this feeling, you start to form a community together and you have common goals. You start to identify yourself on a European level and not just on a national or local level, which is more than inspiring actually. And when you are inspired, it is your responsibility to inspire your local community and your co-workers and colleagues, or even your family, so they can follow you in this road. Together, you can start then to adopt the knowledge and the know-how and the new methodologies for your needs and circumstances, so you can all grow together. And in our case, in Kabotza, actually, this is a way of how we try to learn to fly together. So during the pandemics, we actually decided that we want to do an artistic movement with the Small Size Big Citizens organization. And we produced a short video together.
la cuerda va siembra.
Watch the entire video. Thank you very much.
Cantando va.
I'm Sylvain Cornu. I'm the head of international coordination and partnerships at the Canada Council for the Arts. So I'm going to do a quick introduction about the council, about Canada, and maybe opportunities for international collaboration. I spent half of my life in Canada and the other half in France. So I was born in France. I'm sure you can see that I still have my French accent. I'm sure you all know a little bit Canada, but I think it's important to give you a little bit of context, and especially the context I will share with you is important when we think about international collaboration. So the Canada has 10 provinces and 3 territories, and the territory extends from the Atlantic to the Pacific and northward into the Arctic Ocean, so covering more or less 10 million square kilometers, making it the world's second largest country by total area in the world. And coast to coast, Canada, it's 5,800 kilometers. So when you imagine that, like between Montreal and Vancouver, and Montreal is not like the far east of Canada, but between Montreal and Vancouver, there is like 4,500 kilometers. And between Montreal and Paris, there's 5,500 kilometers. So it's not a big difference. The vastness of the territory has a huge impact on artistic mobility, touring, and international cooperation. And moreover, with only 38 million inhabitants, Canada has as many inhabitants than Poland and 2 times less than France. So Canada cultural interior market is quite limited. A lot of artists and arts organizations here needs to export, work in collaboration with foreign partners to be able to make a living. So more or less, arts, culture, and heritage in Canada represent more than $57 billion in the Canadian economy and close to 673,000 jobs in sectors such as film, video, broadcasting, music, publishing, archives, performing arts, heritage institutions, festivals, and celebrations. Arts and culture in Canada is financially supported in various ways by all levels of government. So the federal level, like the Canada Council for the Arts, provincial level, territorial level, and municipal level. So the federal, the provincial, and the territorial governments all have a department or arts council with responsibility for culture. And some jurisdictions have also additional specialized bodies to support particular cultural industries, such like, for example, Telefilm Canada at the federal level, or the Saskatchewan Film and Video Development Corporation in Saskatchewan at the provincial level. So thought most of the funding for arts and cultural institutions comes from arts council and cultural departments. Funding is often also available from other departments, such as like economic development, tourism, education, parks, recreation. In some provinces, lottery revenues are also a source of funding for cultural and other like charitable causes. And philanthropy is also quite important in Canada. At a federal level, also the Department of Foreign Affairs, so that's our equivalent of a Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Trade, promotes and protects Canadian cultural interests internationally, and have also funding to support cultural activities organized by the network of the Canadian embassies abroad. We have also funding for creative export, for projects that generate export revenues and help Canadian creative industries reach more people around the world. And you have the Canada Council for the Arts, so the main arts funder with a very robust international program called Arts Abroad. So if we move to the next slide, the Canada Council for the Arts particularly has the mandate to foster and promote the study and enjoyment of and the production of works in the arts. So it's a federal crown corporation that is accountable to Parliament through the Minister of Canadian Heritage. And the council is governed by an 11-member board. And the Canadian Commission for UNESCO operates under the authority of the Canada Council for the Arts. So last year, in the middle of the pandemic, we launched a new strategic plan. And as you know, the impact of the pandemic was devastating on the arts sector. But artists, groups, and arts organizations, to their credit, were quite resilient, continued to create and find new ways to reach us. So their resilience became ours, and their artistic offerings, our protection against isolation. So our strategic plan was inspired by the pandemic and by how the artists did react to the pandemic. So this plan puts into words our analysis of the current situation, our vision for the future of the sector, and the role we intend to play to contribute to that future. And we have three main objectives. One is invest in rebuilding and innovation. The other one is to amplify the benefits of the arts for society. And the third one is to nurture and expand collaboration and partnerships in Canada and abroad. And international collaboration is an important part of the rebuilding. And with our international partners, we intend to build on the trust, like-mindedness, and collaborative experience to advance our common objectives in a radically different context. And we are also keen to deepen some regional collaboration to further carve out space for artistic exchange, to develop common cultural narratives beyond political and states relations, and include diasporic artistic communities from Canada. Next slide is our international commitment. So as public funder, we have to support innovative ways to engage on the international stage and continue to deliver a wide range of international initiatives. The pandemic has led to a major shift towards online delivery models of international activities, including like residencies, leadership program, creative collaboration remotely. So we will maintain international cooperation as continued international exchanges in an important part of the recovery plan for the sector, but also we want to embrace and leverage new opportunities and the exploration of new processes, new ways to connect globally. So mainly we support Canadian organization, artists, collectives through our granting programs to collaborate with the rest of the world, to tour, to travel, to develop markets, to develop co-production, to do some residencies, all kind of different level of support. But we also more and more work in partnerships with other organizations in the world, other arts council, ministries of culture, various stakeholders, could be cities at some point also. And we really try to do it in close collaboration now with also some partners in Canada, like municipalities, provincial council, Canadian Heritage, the ministries of Canadian Heritage, and Global Affairs Canada. Our priorities, as you can, it's next slide, sorry, I forgot to tell you. Can you, yeah, so I'm on this slide. So our priorities really and is indigenous arts, and also our commitment to work in a spirit of self-determination, decolonization of our processes, equity, diversity, inclusion, deaf and disability arts, youth, climate change, and innovation. And I'm sure it's some of the priorities you always like share in Europe, in your different countries. Next slide. So, yeah, we also we have also developed in the past, and we continue to do so, some strategic initiatives with partners abroad, like, for example, with the Edinburgh festivals, where we had a Canada hub before the pandemic. We also are commissioner for the Canadian pavilion at the Venice Biennale in architectures, and are also main founder of the Canadian participation in the Venice Biennale in visual arts. We are working with a lot of networks and events in the world, like such WOMEX, ISPA, the International Society for Performing Arts, the International Network for Young Audience in Performing Arts. We have worked also with a lot to organize some Canada focus with partners in the work, and sometimes to put in place some mechanism of collaboration exchange, like joint funds, residency program, and things like that. We're also part of different network, like maybe the two most important one is like the IFACA, it's the International Federation of Arts Council and Cultural Agencies. Our CEO is the chair of this network that includes, like, I think more or less than 80 countries in the world. And obviously, I mentioned at the beginning that the Canadian Commission for UNESCO was under the umbrella of the Canada Council for the Arts, and we work very closely. And for example, with the Creative Cities network that I'm sure you know. And also in terms of cultural diplomacy, Canada is a little bit back. Between like 2010 and 2020, the Canada did not do a lot of things in terms of cultural diplomacy abroad, and did not invest a lot of money. But with the actual government, and with also the willingness of different crown corporations like the Canada Council for the Arts, we work a lot more closely with Canadian mission abroad on different aspect of cultural diplomacy, and with the keeping in mind like the respect of artistic voice, no instrumentalization, but working all together with international partners on like the promotion of constructive dialogues, and on different like message and exchanges related to our like strategic priorities. For the first time in our history in Canada, we have an indigenous person who's the chair of the Canada Council for the Arts. It's Jesse Wenty. And what was very interesting is like when he was appointed as new chair of the council, he said that his goal was simply to reduce the harm Canada Council causes. So, and I think it's a quite powerful statement, because it's true that like the Canada Council for the Arts is like on the model of the council in Europe, and especially the Arts Council England, is a completely based on a model of colonization. And in the past, like everything we have been doing, and how we have organized our program, and how we have defined what's professional arts or not, what's excellency and not, has excluded people. And I think with our new strategic plan and the idea of a decolonized future for the arts, what we want to do is doing less harm and be more inclusive, for sure. What I can share with you is like, obviously the pandemic has shed a harsh light on the many inequities in our society, in many social systems and sector of activity. And I think we now have an increased awareness of systemic barriers that lead to a persistent lack of equity, diversity, and inclusion in the arts, particularly in the workforce and programming of far too many publicly funded organizations. So we support a lot of organizations on core funding, so that means like multi-annual funding. And now for us, they need to address this question of equity, diversity, inclusion. Also, I think the current lack of equity and inclusion has also hindered the engagement of new audiences and limited the flourishing of organization in our increasingly diverse society. So we have put in place mechanism and some special amount of money and funding available to equity seeking groups, such as obviously deaf, disabled artists, but also racialized, Black, Indigenous. So we have really decided to give them like more opportunities. And also, I think what's very important for an organization like the Canada Council is how do you distribute the funding and who's at the table, who's making the decision. And we have worked a lot also on our peer assessment model, because we distribute funding through peer assessment. But who are the peer? What's a peer? Who should be at the table? Who should make the decision? Are we inclusive enough? Like, are we only bringing white people to decide on funding? So I think we have like made a lot of progress, and I think it's quite important for all the organization to reflect on that, like how you become more equitable, diverse, and inclusive. Also, I think some business models in general in the arts have reached their limit, and we'll launch next week a new fund for innovation to support innovative models to create new possibilities in the arts, but also to include like more people. So different ways, but I would be more than happy to share with Sylvia like our whole strategy in terms of reaching and working with deaf and disabled artists. Also, I have to tell you that at Council, we have a lot of program officers like in charge of like the relation with the community and in charge to distribute the grants and put in place like the mechanism of peer assessment committee. And some of them are deaf or disabled. So the Canada Council workforce, like our employees, there is also diversity and inclusion. And also we obviously, like a lot of organizations, translate, have targeted engagement strategy to reach out, like, for example, the deaf community, where like, you have to put in place different like strategy to make sure that they feel included and that they can also access our program.